Welcome to Encounter, where we celebrate putting faith into action and community leaders who live out compassion, grace, and love. We're a program of the Broome County Council of Churches that addresses food insecurity through CHOW and the Greater Good Grocery, provides hospital and jail ministry, builds wheelchair ramps, and assists neighbors with transportation and shopping services through Faith in Action volunteers. We invite you to the conversation. Encounter your neighbors as we learn to walk together in love and kindness.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Encounter. I'm still currently your host, Jeff Kellam, the Parish Associate at the Union Presbyterian Church in Endicott. If all you know about policing is what you see on TV, either in the newscasts from Chicago, Washington, New York, or perhaps the police procedural dramas that you see, the CSIs or the Law and Order, this and that, or maybe that one unfortunate police stop along 17 when you were going just a little bit over the limit. I hope you'll stay tuned for today's program because our guest is Captain Chris Streno, who is the captain at the Vestal Police Department, and we're going to be talking about policing, police culture, whatever that is, about diversity and about some of the issues involved in local policing. And I want to start by saying, when you were a kid, I know the answer to this question because we talked about this at lunch one time. Did you want to be a policeman when you grew up?
You know, I like most kids, like many kids,
Yeah.
I dreamed of being a police officer since I was little.
Yeah. Why? Do you know?
Well, you know, I don't remember this, but I was young as 6 years old, according to my parents. You know, I told them I wanted to be a police officer, and they said, "Why? So you can put bad guys away?" And my answer was, "No, so I can help people."
Yeah.
It's corny, but it's the truth.
Right. When I look at my second grade picture, I think I wanted to be Hopalong Cassidy. I think there was a Hopalong Cassidy sweater, very garish, but I was so proud of that and my 2 6-shooters and so on. You are a captain in the Vestal Police, and you've been on the force in Vestal for
I'm about to complete my 27th year.
27 years.
Yes.
Where did you get your training?
Well, my law enforcement career started as a corrections officer for the Broome County Sheriff's Office. So I was there for almost 5.5 years before I got the call to come to Vestal.
Right.
And then I went to the Broome County Law Enforcement Academy.
Which is where?
Right at the Sheriff's Office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
right at Broome County Sheriff's Office.
So it's at the community college. It's
right behind it there at the
Yeah.
Public Safety Building.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so during these years, you've risen through the ranks to captain.
Yes.
And now my simple question is, what does a captain do?
Well,
I'm not at all familiar with the ranks and so on.
Sure. So, you know, I started like everyone else as a patrol officer, and then became a detective. Then I was promoted to sergeant, became a patrol supervisor again.
Yeah.
Then back to the detective division as a detective supervisor, and then lieutenant, and now captain.
Yeah.
It's a much more administrative role. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes certifications and things that departments need to keep up with that people don't really realize that it has to be handled administratively.
Right. You and I were talking about accreditation earlier. The department has to be accredited. By whom and for what purpose?
So we have an accreditation program in New York State. You know, it's overseen in Albany. And it's a very strict list of over 100 standards that you have to meet and comply with every year and show proof of compliance.
Right.
It takes a lot of work. It's very time consuming. And in the end, you know, it goes to your professionalism. It shows that your agency is up to date on the most recent industry standards, requirements, societal expectations.
Yeah. So you were trained some 27, 28 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
How has the training changed? How do you perceive that training of police officers has evolved through the years?
Well, I think like any other industry, we live and learn. We learn from our mistakes. You know, we learn from what works and what doesn't. And things have changed dramatically over the decades I've been in law enforcement. I've seen a lot of, I've I started with the sheriff's office in late 1991, so I was working in 1992 during the LA riots after the Rodney King beating. And that was an interesting time to be working in a correctional facility, I'll tell you. And I remember my Corrections Academy class, we got a pavilion at State Park to do our baton training. And we're all dressed in our black academy gear, and we're hitting these bags, and we're all yelling in unison, get back, get down. Yeah. And I'm watching families walk by, between their swimming and their campsite, and this is during the LA riots. And I remember seeing the looks on their faces and thinking, wow, what must we look like, right?
Especially the kids.
And so there was, it's ebbed and flowed over my career. And I worked during 9/11. I was a police officer on 9/11, and after that, people came out of the woodwork to support law enforcement.
Right.
It was an amazing show of unity in our country. But then moving forward, there have been polarizing incidents involving law enforcement that I've seen, that have changed the landscape of how the media portrays law enforcement. And, COVID, police reform that came out of, national and out of New York State. So there's been many changes, and a lot of them have to do with training. Mostly more recently, we're looking at training our officers in procedural justice, being aware of your implicit biases. We had part of police reform was forming a committee with your local stakeholders in the community and meeting on a regular basis to work with the community to see what ways you could improve the police department. Yeah. There's always room for improvement. But I think one of the best things about police reform is it gave us an opportunity to show the public we're already doing almost all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not been labeled this way.
Yeah.
So, but we are doing procedural justice training, implicit bias training, trying to teach officers that there's a way to deal with people. And most officers are already doing this. They just haven't been able to label it,
You mentioned the difference in the way you used to stop a car, a traffic stop, and the first thing the officer would say was license and registration.
Right.
So now that's evolved into what?
Well, we've learned through this procedural justice training, there are studies that show citizens are more interested in the delivery than they are the outcome. Or the interaction with an officer than they are the actual outcome. And there are studies that show that people who get pulled over for a violation and they get let go with a warning, but the officer, they didn't feel respected or didn't get a chance to tell their story or just didn't have a good interaction with the officer, they are less likely to be appreciative than someone who actually got a ticket but had a good interaction. Huh. It's tough to imagine, but there are studies that prove it. So it's about the delivery more than it is the outcome. Yeah. In many cases.
And it's a matter of feeling that you could tell your story, you were listened to.
Sure.
The officer was interested in what you had to say.
Right. So what we want is legitimacy. So police legitimacy is basically the citizens accepting the fact that we have the power to make the decisions we make, not questioning that, not wondering if we're doing the right thing. And you gain that legitimacy through a couple of different ways. Right off the bat, it's treating everyone with respect, no matter who they are.
Right.
And we stress that, and most people do that. Most officers do that. We treat people with respect. We give them a voice. In essence, we let you tell your story. And I'm a hostage negotiator, and I know from my training that people just need to vent sometimes.
Yeah.
And if you put this if you exercise this, you find that people with complaints often just need to tell their story, and they feel better.
Yeah.
And you really haven't done anything except to listen.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about listening skills, active listening. So you treat people with respect, you give them a voice, you let them tell their story, you make your decisions with neutrality. You listen to both sides of the story instead of one.
Right.
And then make a decision based on both sides.
Yeah.
And finally, you have transparency. You explain why you made your decision. Mm-hmm. And people need to hear that. Yeah. And even if they don't agree with it, most people will accept the fact, if you follow all of those, they'll accept your decision based on that.
Yeah.
But if you just tell people things, they're not likely to have a good
Sure.
interaction.
Sure.
And then the outcome doesn't matter.
Yeah. You talked about a training event, because we talked about continuing education,
Mm-hmm.
that every profession has some sort of continuing
Sure.
education.
Sure.
And there was a seminar that you did, and I was questioning whether some of the more seasoned officers would be reluctant to become involved in it, thinking the newer guys probably would think, oh yeah, this is just an offshoot of my own training. But you said the seasoned officers are just as receptive to this,
Yes.
if not more so.
So I went to the Train the Trainer for the procedural justice to become a presenter and to be certified in this. And I noticed that, and my chief and I went together a couple of years ago, and most of the class was administrators, upper level management. Yeah. And it was very well received by everyone there. You have a perception that you're going to take this back to your agency, and you're going to have some pushback.
Yeah.
And we did a joint presentation with the Endicott Police Department. So Vestal and Endicott met together, and we gave it to our entire department, everybody. And we found that the senior officers were even more able to speak up, give examples, tell stories, and be productive, be a part of the discussion. So
Yeah.
it was very nice to see.
Yeah. You mentioned the Endicott Police Department, and I should have said at the outset of the program that Captain Chris Streno is not speaking for the Broome County Sheriff. He's not speaking for law enforcement in other jurisdictions, and sometimes not even for Vestal.
Right.
This is a one-on-one conversation between you and me. But you mentioned the Endicott Force. What is the cooperative network among the various? I mean, we hardly know when we cross from Johnson City into Binghamton, except for the arch, maybe.
Right.
The lines are not on the street, so we don't know who's. What is your cooperative network among the various forces, including Binghamton University?
Well, we all the local agencies work very well together. Our police chiefs meet monthly, and they have a roundtable discussion of issues that affect each other.
Do you eat?
Well, I don't get to go to those meetings. Those are for the chiefs.
Okay.
I think they do, of course. They're chiefs, right?
Right.
Regional detectives get together. We have a wonderful crime analysis center located in Binghamton, and they host a monthly meeting of detectives. We did that, way back when I was in detectives. We did it before they had the center, but it's expanded now. It's a nice roundtable discussion. So every agency comes and is represented. I mean, we get all the way up to Ithaca, out to Elmira, because our stuff overlaps.
Sure.
It absolutely does. We have some of the same, people dealing in our jurisdictions, and the same problems. Even if it's not the same people, we can discuss that. So they do roundtable discussions. Everyone gets a chance to speak, say, here's what we're seeing, and then they collaborate with each other if they can. The town of Vestal has members on the Metro SWAT team. We have a joint SWAT team with the city of Binghamton and the village of Johnson City.
Yeah.
Our narcotics investigators work in a task force with the state police. So, we all know each other. We all pretty much go to the same police academy, and our patrol officers now with the computers in their cars. We all run through the Broome County Dispatch, so patrol officers are able to communicate with officers from other agencies that way. So we're very well connected, and everyone works very well together.
And in this network and the communication among the various agencies, people talk about the crime rate. Do you get a sense that the crime rate is level and stable in our whole area, or is it going up and down?
Well, I don't have any numbers to back up what I say right now, and this is really just my opinion.
Sure.
And I want to be careful not to get myself in trouble.
Sure.
But the bail reform laws have caused some problems. People are not really being held responsible for their actions right now.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot more repeat offenders because their deterrent isn't quite what it used to be.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, crime is up. I don't have the numbers. Certainly, we, like many other communities, have been dealing with an opioid abuse, an addiction pandemic, if you will, or so with that comes other crime. A lot of theft comes with that. A lot of other stuff. There are gangs. There are drugs. So it's prevalent.
Yeah,
crime is prevalent.
Even in our small community.
Absolutely.
We watch television about big cities. Rarely see something about a community our size. We had Sheriff Andy in Newberry or whatever, Mayberry, small town sheriff, but most of the programs that we see on TV are the large urban areas,
right.
and we think we're kind of immune from that. But I know that my grandson has recently gone on the force out in the Midwest. He just finished from the Law Enforcement Academy, and he was saying that as he works in the jail there, which is his kind of beginning work in that area, that he's seeing a lot of mental illness, a lot of mental health issues, and addiction. That these are not folks who meant to go out and rob a store, but out of desperation for what they needed for their drugs and so on. So the training that you go through has to include things like addiction and mental health.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the big changes in law enforcement over recent years is looking at addiction as an illness. And I'll be honest. I sit on a peer response committee that meets monthly, and we talk about addiction and what we can do. We make referrals to counselors and peers.
Right.
But I think an overdose in the past, as a police officer, I would respond to an overdose and think of it as an EMS call.
Yeah.
Right. So now we look at it differently. We're looking at the individual. We're trying to figure out where that came from. Is there something we can do to investigate this further? But we're not looking at that individual as a criminal necessarily. We're looking at them as a victim, and I think that's more and more prevalent in law enforcement right now.
Right. I'm interested in beyond your job as the captain. Our guest today is Captain Chris Streno of the Vestal Police Department. You're active in the community in other ways too, that you do have another life. Tell me about some of the things that you do as extracurriculars that are enriching to you as a person.
Well, I have 3 teenagers, and I've been coaching.
Enough said.
I've been coaching them in youth sports since they were about 5 years old. I am the youth activities director for my town, and I'm also run the youth youth football program for my school district. I'm also the planning board chair for my town, so I have I think without realizing it, I really do have a sense of serving my community, so my other job is also, serving the community.
Sure.
I enjoy doing what I can to do others. There's a saying, I've seen this saying in law enforcement a lot of times: if I don't do it, who will? And I think that's a sense of service. Yeah. I do a lot of instructing at the police academy, and one of the things I always tell the recruits is you need to understand that we are in the service industry. And sometimes I get some pushback on this, but I have an analogy that I say that relates to police response. And I say, you go to a fast food restaurant, and you pull up to the microphone, and you expect someone to answer promptly, politely, respectfully. You give them your order, you pull up to the next window, you give the person your money. You're looking for a good value for your money. You're looking for respect and politeness. And you pull up to the next window, and you're looking for, prompt service and accurate service. And then you drive away. it's not much different than people calling the police.
Yeah.
I want the police to show up on time. I want them to be respectful. I want them to listen to what I have to say, and I want to get a good bang for my buck,
Yeah.
when they're done.
Yeah, right. Working with youth, as you do, the image of young people with their interaction with police. I remember when I was growing up, but the only interaction I had with police was the crossing guard, because he was a member of the Endicott Police Department, and he helped us cross at the corner of Loader and East Main in Endicott. And a wonderful personality, and it was, I guess, my first, if I'm going to have an interaction with a police officer, that's what I want to have.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you build bridges with the youth of our community?
Well, there was no such thing as school resource officers when I was in school, certainly. I know you probably experienced the same thing.
Sure.
And this has developed into a wonderful program of introducing police. But the school resource officer has to, be 100% into that position. They are not just a security guard, They are mentors, they're coaches, they're extra parental, type people when necessary. But they're also there to help the staff. They're educators as well. And it's been a great service to the community, I think, since it's been developed. And another thing, I tell young police officers is, you're going to get used to going to people's homes, to strangers' homes. You're going to get used to seeing some terrible things. And as we build up defense mechanisms, we may have to joke about something that's tragic just to help us get through the situation.
Sure.
But you have to remember and go back to your own childhood. To have a police officer in your living room, no matter what reason, is a traumatic event for many people.
Yeah.
And I think I remember my very first encounter with a police officer was I was riding in a car with my mother when I was little, and we got into a minor car accident. And I remember this stoic, authoritative police officer there. I don't remember him being happy or friendly, right?
Right.
And so we have to remember that as we get going in our careers. They don't call us up and say, we're having a birthday party, can you send a patrol car over to hang out with us? Right? They call us when they're in their worst times.
Right.
And we have to remember that, because after a while you get desensitized if you're not careful.
Yeah. Wow. I can see that, and I also know that's true of many chaplains who work in hospitals, for example.
Yeah.
You have to remember your role, but you also have to remember you're there to serve.
Yes.
And part of that service is building, establishing trust, exhibiting compassion and understanding, and I can see where that is certainly going to be of use to a police officer as well.
Yeah.
When we talk about, I was just thinking of when I was growing up in this community. I was born at Wilson Hospital, and now I've been away, a few decades away, and then have come back. The population has changed. It was Caucasian.
Sure.
I mean, almost all white.
Yeah.
And I remember a person of color at my high school, for example. Things have changed now.
Yeah.
How has the police department moved toward more diversity on its staff? Well,
I think the police agencies should look like their community as much as possible. That makes sense. That's common sense.
Yeah.
I think if you look at big city police departments, you'll see a much more diverse group than you realize. I think you look at a place like NYPD, you have an extremely diverse group of people working in that police department. When it comes to small town or smaller, areas, we're bound by civil service. Civil service was created for a good reason, to get rid of nepotism in hiring and political favor, paying back political favors with hires. So it has its positives. The negatives are you have to test,
right,
and then you have to score in a certain part of that test.
Yeah.
So you do risk the problem of having good test takers who aren't going to be great police officers, and then you have people who could be really good police officers who aren't good test takers.
Not quite doing it. Yeah.
So it's difficult, and we're bound by that. So we get a list, and we have to choose from the list.
Right.
So we're not out, we can't recruit for the job. We can recruit for the test. We can recruit and say, hey, we'd like you to come take the test, and then we hope that
Right.
you score well.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for agencies who are seeking to diverse. We've done a great job over the years of diversing between male and female. We have 4 female officers now, 2 of them both canine officers.
Right.
So, I think that's some diversity for us, and we're proud of that.
Yeah.
But there's always room for improvement. We do some recruiting. We do go to some job fairs. We go to SUNY Broome for their expo,
Yeah.
We do what we can. We look for lateral transfers too, and we do the best we can.
Right. Yeah, I hadn't thought about recruiting before, but a job fair would be a natural place to go, and kind of maybe somebody had ever thought about being a police officer, but now if they see your booth there and know a little bit more about the work and what it involves locally, that would be something that would invite them into at least the conversation.
And now, we're not just hiring off the top 3, we're competing with local agencies off the same list.
Yeah.
And the lists are a lot different than they were when I first started.
Right.
My first police test was with the state police. I scored in the 90s, never took a police test before. I was really proud of myself. I thought I was doing great, thought I was going to be a state trooper.
Yeah.
I was 1,125 on the list. And I was working with a recruiter, and she called me and said, "I'm sorry, we'll never get to you."
Right.
We had about 39 people take the last Broome County police test.
Yeah.
And I was in the thousands
Yeah.
with a 90 plus,
Right.
back then. So
Yeah.
times are changing
Yeah.
for law enforcement.
Yeah. We have about a minute left. What would you say to our audience about keeping safe and about paying attention to your surroundings and that kind of thing? Safety issues.
I do a lot of presentations, and I try to always talk about situational awareness. We have a society that walks around with their head buried into their smartphones now. We've all probably had to stop our car quickly because someone walked in front of us while they're looking into your phone. We have earbuds in, headphones. We're not paying attention to what's going on around us, and it could be a life-saving thing to do, is to just pay attention to what's going on around you, the people, the conversations, and those things. I'm also a big prevention guy. I really am into prevention. So, I have a saying: if it's predictable, it's preventable.
Yeah.
Lock your cars at night.
Yeah.
Lock your windows. Get cameras. Talk to your neighbors. Know your neighbors.
Yeah.
So that they can recognize if something is not right at your house.
Right.
One final thing I want to say is just remember that police are human.
Yeah.
Right? We're all human. We're all brothers and sisters and sons and daughters, and we go home to our families at night, and people expect us to be robots, but it's not going to happen.
Our guest today has been Chris Streno, who's the captain of the Vestal Police Department. And Chris, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you very much.
I've learned a lot, and it's been a pleasure to get to meet you, and I hope you'll give me a warning next time you see me. I'm Jeff Kellam. Thank you for being with us for the Encounter program, which is produced by the Broome County Council of Churches in cooperation with WBNG-TV, with our thanks to the Town Square media stations for carrying the audio portion of our program. We'll see you again next time. In the meantime, good night. Goodbye.